I thought that was phenomenal. I think the first thing James Harden needs to do is he needs to go find the nearest treadmill in Brooklyn and start losing the 15 pounds that he put on and getting in championship shape, because they're going to be deep in the playoffs. And I know people are getting into this, oh, they're disgruntled, blah, blah, blah. James Harden has never played with really anybody where he can throw the ball to them and they're going to go get a bucket.
And they're just as good as him, if not better.
Right. He had Chris Paul. He had Chris Paul for
Chris
1
Paul
year.
was really good.
Was healthy, and guess what? They were one Chris Paul injury from going to the finals. So I think the James Harden slander is often overblown, and I think this is a good chance for him to show the other styles of basketball that he can play. Because I think one of the most underrated things about him is that he's one of the best passers in the NBA, especially in the pick and roll. So I think that if they have to move Kyrie Irving, or Kyrie Irving wants to take another large leave of absence, James Harden can play point guard for them. They can run the pick and roll, and James Harden's going to be super slick and dish out 15 assists in his sleep, and it can be like that. Number two, I think him and KD are actually a really, really nice fit next to each other, because I think that James Harden, for the most part, with the Rockets, what happened was they would just spread the floor and they would say, James, you got to just boogie on people. So he would have to do this in between the legs, set up, get his change of pace dribble, and then he either goes around the guy and sets somebody else up, hits the floater, steps back from three. He doesn't have to do that anymore. He can be really efficient because he knows that he can throw the ball to the 7-foot guy on the other side who in 2 dribbles can take a mid-range jumper and drill it. And in 15 shots, he can score 35 points. So I think it's a really good fit that way. And I think the biggest thing for Brooklyn is they have to integrate a huge piece like James Harden mid-season. I think that's going to be their biggest question, because talent-wise, I don't think anybody's going to really compete in the East. And, people bring up defense, but I think they have enough people in their roster that can defend. And I think James Harden can also defend in spots. And I think the fact that they're going to be so difficult to stop on offense, maybe Philly with Joel Embiid gives them a little bit more trouble. Giannis probably gives them a little bit more trouble, and Milwaukee can defend straight across. But ultimately, nobody's stopping those 3 guys, and they can defend in any type of way. So I think that the Nets are now headed, I would say, for a collision course with the Lakers. And I'm really interested to see how that turns out.
Yeah, so you brought up some good points. I'm going to go a little sideways from you on this. So my only few things that I'm just kind of dying to see is, how is this bench unit going to be for the Nets? So
they got Bruce Brown, former Piston.
They do. And hopefully he gets big minutes, because that man, if you guys watch the Jordan documentary, a lot of NBA takes came after that. And Bruce Brown, formerly Piston, now on the Nets, stated that he's going to instill the Jordan mentality into the Pistons locker room. He's on the Nets now, so I'm assuming KD, Harden, and Kyrie, if they didn't have killer instinct and taking everything personally, they will have it now. And
so just a little bit of context to that. The reason we know this is because I'm a big Pistons fan, and one time I was just scrolling through Pistons Twitter, and I saw that Bruce Brown said that he wanted to incorporate Jordan's leadership into his own. Very noble thought, except Bruce Brown was a solid role player for the Pistons who had potential because he played hard and he played good defense. And instilling Jordan's kind of Napoleon dictatorship type seemed a little insane for somebody who's not a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant. So I just thought we used to joke about this, and now that the Nets have them, we just feel like they're going to have that killer instinct. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Blake.
Not to get too off topic, but when you look at the beginning of the season, the pieces they had on the bench, they had LeVert, they had Jared Allen, they had Dinwiddie. All 3 of those guys are gone. DeAndre Jordan's starting at center, and he's been a little lackluster this year, not the best. So that worries me, who's going to fill that backup center role? I'm sure they could get a ring chaser who's a decent enough role player to help cover some of those minutes. So I'm not too worried on that end. But, yeah, that bench is going to be interesting, because I think we've seen playoff teams usually, deep into the playoffs, they have to have at least 7, usually 8 guys that can actually come on the floor and not be complete liabilities. And it's interesting to see if they have that. And my other thing is, Kyrie is going to be the 3rd option, which is, I never imagined we'd ever say that after seeing what he did on the Cavs. And I'm interested to see how he takes it, because he's obviously a very ball-dominant player. And I know KD can play off ball. We know James Harden can play off ball. But those dudes are also debatably top 5 ISO scorers. So,
All time, maybe.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they integrate 3 ISO scores. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Steve Nash isn't like he's a coach. He's literally an NBA coach. He's an NBA legend. Like these dudes, like that's what they're living and breathing, and like they'll figure it out somehow, right? By the time they get to the playoffs, hopefully, that's the thought. But yeah, the chemistry is going to be interesting. And do you want to talk about the Kyrie like antics before we move off of the Nets?
Real quick, before we go to Kyrie, because I do want to hit that, there's one thing I did want to mention in regards to what you said. So I think one thing that has to happen is that I think James Harden is going to have to be the guy that no longer scores 35, because I think he's the guy that can run the offense the best out of the three. So I think James Harden's going to have to play like a point guard, and he's going to average like maybe 20, 25, and he's going to have to average 10, 8 to 10 assists and really get people involved and play that style. And he's really capable of playing that style. Yeah, he can do it. He's just going to have to be willing to do that. And then, because you can go to Kyrie, and Kyrie can go off and go berserk and do Kyrie things. And KD, obviously, he just needs 15 shots to score 35 casually. He's that good. And then the other thing is, I think their bench isn't that bad. Because when you have those three, you have 3 primary ball handlers who can run your offense at any point on the floor. So I don't think they would ever play in the 48 minutes without at least 2.
Well, they would employ the other dudes. Like you need at least 7 dudes on your team.
I think Jeff Green pretty solid. Okay, I think Jeff Green works out for them enough to be okay. I think Luau Cabarro shoots the ball pretty well, 38% shooter from 3. He can play a bit. Bruce Brown, as much as, we joke with Bruce Brown, former Piston, I still wish he was a Piston. He was a solid defender. He played hard. He's a solid defender. He's going to play hard. And then the fourth guy that I think is going to really make the impact, one second, I'm blanking on his name. Let me get it from the roster. I apologize. Is Landry Shaman. So I think if they had Dinwiddie, this would be totally elite. Dinwiddie's injury hurts a little bit. But I think Landry Shaman is not a very good defensive player, but he can come off screens, he can shoot the 3, and he's aggressive and he's willing to shoot the ball. And I think he would be a really good piece. And then you go to the fact that I think Joe Harris, I'm not sure if he would start with this lineup. Maybe he would for the floor spacing, but Joe Harris, I think, is more than a shooter. I think Joe Harris also at this point has evolved his game to the point where he can take it in and lay the ball up if you start closing out on him hard, where maybe Joe Harris comes off the bench and is like big off the bench. Yeah. So I think that could be a possibility. But I think there's enough there where there's a championship formula and championship pieces. It's just about them getting reps and playing together, which brings us to the guy who's not playing, Kyrie Irving.
I just want to respond real quickly. So you named a bunch of guys off the bench who will probably get minutes and have an impact. But how many like power forwards and centers did you say? There's not many, right? Okay, like if they get in foul trouble, they're gonna start KD at the 5. Like someone's got to play those minutes.
Let me throw out one theory, okay? Before we go, and before you go, real quick, one theory, okay? So we have another friend who also brought this up, but I've been talking about this just in texting with my friends and stuff about this trade, texting with a bunch of random friends and stuff. Here's the thing with this. I think what's going to happen, or what could happen, the only thing is this guy's age, and this happening would be a little unprecedented. So the Cleveland Cavaliers got Jared Allen. I'm assuming they got Jared Allen because they think he's going to be part of their young core with Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, and Kevin Porter here, Larry Nance. So I think Jared Allen's going to be there. Andre Drummond's making $27 million, and he's on his last year of his contract. I think Andre Drummond's going to get moved during this trade deadline, and I think what's going to happen is that he's going to get traded to some bad team who's going to immediately cut him, and because they can take the salary. And players at Andre Drummond's age usually don't get signed, but if he wants to go to the Nets and go for the league minimum, I think that's the one guy they could get for their bench as the second.
That would be a great pickup. My thing is it hasn't. I'll wait to see what they do because they have to address it somehow. You can't go in with just your biggest dude being DeAndre Jordan and that's it. Like that's just simply like they'll pick up someone, right? But it's interesting to like think about like because that is a serious concern. If DeAndre Jordan gets in foul trouble tomorrow, I don't know if they play, but let's say tomorrow, like who's playing the 5?
Who's guarding Giannis? Who's guarding Embiid? Yeah.
Yeah, but now we can move on to Kyrie.